Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We're trying to get to that 1K, feel me? Also, we're going to hit the educational sector. The idiot politicians, the school funding, what goes on in these schools and these classrooms and everything. This is very important, especially to those of you that want kids so bad in this world of shit. So let's go ahead and figure out what's going on.
The number of students attending public schools in the United States has been falling since 2020. California has experienced steeper enrollment declines than the national average over a longer period of time, which is consistent with an exodus from California.
There are two leading factors that contribute to a decline in enrollment. The first one is lower birth rates. Fewer kids are being born. That's the number one impact. The second impact for California is historically we've been a net migration in state. During the pandemic, from quarter to quarter, it kind of shifted between net migration and net migration.
Well, they start off in my neck of the woods. Well, kind of. I'm in the East Bay. I mean, take a look at the freeway sign. If you know, you know. Leave it at that.
We've not offset the decline in birth rates with migration from other states.
Birth rates are down, and they have been down for a while. So where we see that in schools, it's with smaller kindergarten class, first grade class. It's not in high school.
Did you see how fine that teacher was? And see, I'm going to tell you why it matters. Look at this. These are the teachers that's fucking the students. Little Timmy stayed after class for a nice little treat that the other kids didn't get. Next thing you know, she's giving them sloppy top. And these teachers are freakier than the nurses I was just talking about, or at least we think that the nurses get around like that. No, it's these teachers. Never mind the nurses. We need to be paying attention to these damn teachers. These teachers is fucking the shit out them students.
Grade class. It's not in high schoolers yet because the birth rates weren't down when they were born.
Enrollment decline means the school requires fewer staff or other resources, but it also impacts education budgets. In most states, school funding is based on how many students are enrolled, or in California's case, how many actually show up each day.
Because understand, with all these registered students, the more students that don't show up like they're supposed to, the school loses money. The schools lose money when the students don't show up. It doesn't matter if they're sick or not. If they're not there, the school ain't getting paid.
That means fewer kids equals fewer dollars.
Most districts don't want to lay off staff or walk back pay raises, and so they have gaps in their budgets. Those are coming at the same time when they have enrollment declines. So really, it's putting a lot of pressure on school district budgets right now.
This drop in enrollment was happening in some states prior to the pandemic. However, an influx of federal relief money obscured the financial decline.
During the pandemic and the pandemic recovery period, the federal government put a lot of federal relief dollars into school districts. Usually school districts are mostly funded with state and local dollars. So this was a lot of extra new money. Then that money went away. When the federal government chose to put those relief funds in school districts, it had nothing to do with enrollments. It was, wow, these kids have been out of school for the pandemic. We need them to come back to school. We know that school districts have some unusual expenses right now. So they didn't worry about the fact that we had fewer students coming in. Then when the money went away, it exposed who had used all these federal funds to prop up their basic budgets that weren't sustainable because they had been losing kids for a while.
Staff doesn't just mean teachers.
Most school districts use those funds to add services to kids, specifically learning recovery kinds of services, social and emotional learning support services to kids. The way school districts provide services to kids is through staff.
Even in states where enrollment grew, staffing rates grew faster, such as in Texas, where enrollment increased by nearly 6%, while staffing went up by more than 15%.
Normally, when we have an enrollment decline, it happens gradually over time, and districts slowly and gradually use attrition to shrink their workforce. They close a school 1 year and then they close another one 3 years later. The problem now is we didn't do any of that for the last 5 years because we had all this COVID money. So now we're reckoning with all of those fiscal gaps all at once as they're continuing to get worse.
The consequence of that is that we
Now, see, back in the day, look at all these school buses. The yellow school bus. The slow kids used to ride the school bus back in the day. So, if your kids are on this school bus now, the elders might make some jokes, whatever, but why does it even matter? Because once these kids get on social media, their brains are just wired and fried.
We've got extra staff and we have to adjust for that because with fewer kids, there's less revenue and you have a need for fewer staff to serve those kids, the kids you have left.
Pasadena Unified School District in Southern California announced to the community in 2024 that they were considering staffing cuts due to budget shortfalls. PUSD has seen a steady decline in enrollment since 2014, just like the broader trend in California. The superintendent's leadership also says
the attrition of students did not match the current staffing model that they currently had.
My name is Jonathan Gardner. I'm president of the Teachers Union in Pasadena.
And by the way, California schools are a no. They're just a no. If you live in California, you're better off homeschooling your kids or putting them in private school if you guys had the money. Because the public schools, in California is going to ruin y'all's kids. Horrible system to be in.
Called the United Teachers of Pasadena. We knew that they were considering cuts in the fall. They just decided that students don't need the stability of having their teachers around, and they were going to cut, because they can, an extra $5 million in teacher positions. We have about 117 teachers now that are being told that they're not coming back next year.
Wow.
Pasadena Unified School District has 23 schools and roughly 14,000 students. The news of the cuts has led to pushback from the community.
We know that our budget situation calls for reduced spending, and because 80 to 90% of our education expenditures are for...
She got Cheetos in the background. Well, this ain't the right video for that. Let's keep going.
personnel, when we have big budget cuts, it will affect people.
Parents and teachers didn't just oppose the layoffs. They accused the district of poor planning,
And by the way, this school kind of reminds me of the elementary school I went to. I mean, pretty obviously, it's old-fashioned. And I remember my mom telling me when I got home from school, by the way, I grew up in Vallejo, California. So there's a lot of old elementary schools like this. So when I come home from school, my mom was like, you got that school smell on you. What she was talking about is these old ass buildings that have these basement smell. Like if you ever been in an old house in the basement, it's a smell. It's almost like mold, mildew, but then it's not. It's like after something is so old, it's kind of like an old car smell. Like if you get inside a car that was made in like the 1990s, it has a certain smell. Like a Honda Civic, a Honda Accord type smell.
place priorities, and cutting the wrong corners.
Teacher salaries are barely 30% of the district's entire budget. So cutting 10% of us means you're only saving 3% overall. I'm not a math teacher, but what are you doing? Why must we do this every year? Having to face these reduction in force cuts, these rifts, year after year is exhausting.
These certificated reductions is that they are mainly at the school site, so I know that parents and staff at the school sites feel very affected by it. We did do a significant number of central office reductions last year.
While district officials pointed to enrollment and funding as drivers of the cuts, critics argue the decisions reflect deeper, longer-standing problems.
Pasadena Unified has made a habit of spending extra money on administration and contracted services whenever they have a grant. And
see, understand something, you guys. The teachers don't get paid a lot of money. That's pretty obvious. Also, keep in mind that most teachers can't afford a rent or a mortgage. So a lot of these teachers are probably married to either nurses or doctors or somebody that's way above what their job level is. But then, mind you, the superintendents of the schools and everything, some of them are overpaid. Like some of the administrators in these schools, they're paid way more than the teachers. And the teachers should be on their level because the teachers go through a lot of stress dealing with y'all's badass kids that don't know how to act. Does it make sense? Good.
then they continue that expense once the grant ends. And in fact, that's exactly what they did with ESSER funding. A lot of why we're dealing with our current budget shortfalls, at least projected shortfalls, because they overspent in admin and they never cut, and they overspent in contracted services and they never cut, which, ultimately we're balancing the budget on the backs of our students and our teachers.
In response to a request to participate in this report, the Pasadena Unified School District Board of Education pointed CNBC to a March 2025 community update from the superintendent, which read in part, PUSD has been struggling with a structural deficit since before the COVID pandemic because of declining enrollment, rising costs, maintaining a full commitment to mandated services, and lower than anticipated funding from the state.
What about trusting the teachers? Like I said in the beginning of the video, there's a lot of these teachers are perverted because they're stressed out. Whatever's going on at home, sometimes it spills into the classroom. There's some days, have you ever noticed certain days your teacher is more stressed out than some other days? There's stuff going on. Bills ain't getting paid. They not getting none from their spouse at home. And sometimes they just take all the frustration out on certain children, your daughter or your son. And for some reason, it seems like the male teachers are getting caught up just as much as the female teachers. So this is gender equality right here, especially when it comes to teachers in schools fucking the shit out your kids.
One of these significant cost issues is that the state's annual inflation allowance comes nowhere near covering the real increased costs of services that rise every year. Without the actions we've taken, we would face even deeper cuts next year. Though difficult, these reductions were necessary to prevent a $37 million reduction in a single year. Gardner says it's not just about the numbers, but how the decisions get made.
The people making the decision are central office administrators. If our principals had their choice, they would not be
He kind of seemed like a pedophile to me. I don't know. One of them damn computer nerds. Shit I be talking about. Like, they have the weirdest sexual desires, the weirdest fetishes. Dudes like this. When you get off of work, when you leave the office, you go home, fire up the Xbox, and play Roblox.
laying off teachers. Our principals are being cut completely out of this decisions. Our district decided to be just like 4% of our districts statewide to enact layoffs. And every single district in California is facing the same basic math. They all had ESSER funds that were helping to prop up the situation, and those have expired now.
The industry is not made to lay people off. Obviously, education is a very human-intensive industry, and it can become very hard to shrink the workforce.
I don't trust this motherfucker either. Look how tight his pants are. Hide your kids. Hide your wife.
None of us got into this work to lay off teachers and counselors and librarians and nurses and aides and bus drivers, right? That's just not what any of us envisioned when we...
Yeah, that's a little too intimate, bruh. Yeah, you tripping.
Decided to make a career out of this. So the layoff and the reduction in force process is emotionally trying to start with for everybody. But the dollars are limited, and we have to live within the bounds of the financial support that we have. If you're going to hire staff with these one-time funds, put in place an exit plan. When those funds expire, how are you going to exit that environment? Many districts did not develop exit plans or have chosen not to implement the plans they have. And what that means is it came up onto an expiration of...
All right, look at those rooftops. You see them solar panels? That's why y'all losing y'all jobs. They chose to invest in solar panels versus paying y'all to be in the classrooms doing shit with the kids. That's why y'all lost y'all jobs.
Funding, and now all of a sudden they have to deal with the staffing issue. They don't have any breathing room.
Not all districts waited until the money ran out. Some had exit plans that phased out staff over time, relying on retirements and attrition to ease the transition.
of teachers that retire or move away, that you could have moved some of the staff that were funded with one-time funds into those regular positions. That would be a more gradual way to deal with the expiration of the funds and the need for fewer staff, right? Is take advantage of attrition.
San Francisco Unified had
Oh, God, not San
395
Francisco.
teacher layoffs notices that went out, and then they provided a retirement incentive, and all 395 were rescinded. So our district, though, hasn't provided anything, not even like some kind of thank you. We usually lose about 60 to 100 teachers every year, especially right now. We have a lot of, toward the end of their career, teachers, or they're living far away, traveling a lot. So we just see a lot of turnover from that. But they could reduce every single one of the layoffs just based on attrition, which is what we've been pushing for.
Schools may also need to have discussions about priorities for programs.
So we've been offering XYZ service for the last 20 years using ABC source of funds. Maybe it's time that we reprioritize how we're using our existing funds. That's not an easy conversation often to have in a public school board meeting, but it needs to have. You need to pause every once in a while and evaluate all these things that you're spending money on and determine which one's moving the needle in the right direction for kids. Shedding a program that's been around for a number of years is a difficult process and a difficult decision. We have staff tied to those programs. Shifting that, making...
Yeah, they talk a good one. But do we really trust these people? No. Because they're part of the politician team too as well. Therefore, we're going to wrap it up. This is Kyle DeVeo. I hope you enjoyed this humorous entertainment. I mean, who am I? I'm just a black man in California, eh? And I love California, eh? I've been here my whole life, and this is all I know. I'll check you on the next video. Peace.